Hello, students, and welcome to Baking and Pastry here at Central Arizona College. Again, my name is Chef Clay Peden, and I will be your instructor and your culinary arts teacher here for baking and pastry this year. You know, as a student studying the baking and pastry arts, you're entering a world rich in cultural heritage. Knowledge of this heritage is an important part of your culinary education, one that serves as a source of a professional pride. And also, bakers and pastry chefs seem to tap long into this history for inspiration for recipes, different ingredients, and different techniques that you might use in a bakery. So in today's lecture, we're going to talk about the history and the different chefs that changed the industry throughout time. The first bread products humans consumed were firm porridges made from grasses and grains, cooked on flat stones and heated by an open fire. The earliest form of wheat used for bread making, Triticum decome, thrived in fertile basins of the Nile River Valley. The use of a stone oven for bread making dates to the Neolithic period. Remarkably, the ovens discovered in archaeological ruins from that time closely resemble the domed beehive-shaped ovens that we might still use today. It is believed that the Egyptians discovered the effects of wild yeast organisms in leavening bread and perfected bread making to achieve constant results. This discovery also led to the development of beer. Now, what historians interpret as organized bakeries are depicted in hieroglyphics, sculptures, and tomb paintings discovered throughout Egypt. There was as many as 70 kinds of bread that were consumed in the first millennia. Most historians believe that the development of organized societies began with the evolution of agriculture. Once plants and grains could be consistently produced and animals raised systematically, humans were no longer forced to hunt and forage for food. This time saved and allowed them to concentrate on perfecting other skills in craft, such as the way foods were prepared. Now, bread making and confectionery were the first labor activities organized into these specialized trades. Pharaohs employed skilled bakers to provide bread for their private consumption. Among the trades recognized by the highly organized Greek society of the 4th and 3rd centuries. These were the wafer makers, or oblatanes, and the pastry cooks. The religion of ancient Greece focused on the worship of multiple deities and included offerings of gifts to the gods, especially around critical times, to ensure plentiful harvests, adequate rain, and prosperity. As is customary today, certain breads and sweets were eaten to commemorate special occasions. Historians credit the ancient Greeks with spreading the professionalism of a skilled baker throughout the Mediterranean basin. According to the Greek historians, writing in the 4th century, bakers even accompanied roving Greek armies in their raids. When Roman armies conquered them, Greek soldiers and bakers remained in what is now known as Italy. Roman occupation then helped spread the techniques for cultivating grains, milling, and baking bread products throughout the Western world. Bread rapidly became the staple food essential for human survival, a position it has held in most Western societies until the 20th century. Bread making and pastry making found a fertile home in the European continent. In the northern regions, including Austria, Germany, and the Netherlands, Scandinavia, and Great Britain, where a cool, damp climate was inhospitable to wheat growing, rye grain product took a hold. In the 17th century, the Dutch and the British debuted the use of pans in which to make bread, paving the way for development of the sandwich. Until the process for milling flour was perfected in the 1830s, white flour was expensive, and most bread was made from assorted or relatively coarse ground grains. Now, these grains, such as emmer and spelt, baked into rough, textured, solid loaves, quite unlike their light and crusty descendants that are eaten today. The milling process was labor-intense, involving grinding the grain between millstones and then sifting the flour manually through cloth to remove the coarse bran. The finest and whitest flour The smallest quantity produced after many stages of sifting made the softest products and was available only to the wealthy. Now, in the mid-19th century, advances were made in the production of a stable form of yeast to leaven bread. Once perfected by a Viennese distiller, the yeast paste popularized the product of a wider variety of breads. Simultaneously, improved mechanical kneading machines appeared, making the task of a large-scale bread mixing possible. Now, humans share a strong appetite for sweet foods. It is the only universal, innate taste preference. If, for millennia, the consumption of bread ensured substance and survival, then eating sweet foods ensured satisfaction and pleasure. Much for prehistory historians assume that fruits were humans' primary source of sweet foods. Sweet pastes made from dates and figs, and syrups made from juices of fruit trees such as grapes and berries were also used to sweeten foods. Tree sap from maple and birch trees sweetened foods, as did syrups from cooked grains such as sorghum. Honey was the first concentrated sweetener to be widely used. In ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome, honey was used to season both savory and sweet dishes and as a preservative. Egyptian hieroglyphs from the 15th century depicting clay beehives documented the cultivation of bees for their honey. Though many candies and sweet confections can be made from honey, not until refined sugar became readily available did the pastry and confectionery trades evolve. Without refined sugar, many of the candies and sweets widely consumed today would not be possible. Sugarcane produces a liquid syrup that hardens and crystallizes when boiled. Sugar's ability to be both a liquid and a solid, discussed at length in the chapters of your book, makes it indispensable for candy and pastry making. Now, Carême, known as the Cook of Kings and the King of Cooks, was an acknowledged master of French grand cuisine. Abandoned on the streets of Paris as a child, he worked his way from cook's helper in a working-class restaurant to become one of the most prestigious chefs of his, or arguably any other time. Now, during his career, he was a chef to the famous French diplomat and gourmand, Prince de Talleyrand, the Prince Regent of England, the Tsar Alexander I of Russia, and the Baron de Rothschild, among many others. His stated goal was to achieve lightness, grace, and order in the preparation and the presentation of food. As a pâtissier, he designed and prepared elaborate and elegant pastry and confectionery creations, many which he based on architectural designs. He is credited with the invention of the croquembouche, a pulled sugar work. As a saucier, he standardized the use of a roux as a thickening agent and devised a system for classifying different sauces. As a culinary professional, he designed kitchen tools, equipment, and uniforms. As an author, he wrote and illustrated important texts on the culinary arts, including La Pâtissière Royal Parisienne in 1825. It contained fanciful designs for les pieces montées and the great decorative centerpieces that were the crowning glory of grand diners. And his 5-volume masterpiece on the state of his profession, L'Art de la Cuisine à Sicile, in 1833. Carême's writings almost single-handedly refined and summarized 500 years of culinary evolution. But his treatises were not only mere cookbooks. Rather, he analyzed cooking old and new, emphasizing procedure and order, and covering every aspect of the art known as the grand cuisine. The word restaurant is derived from the French word restaurer, meaning to restore. Since the 16th century, the word restorative has been used to describe rich and highly flavored soups or stews capable of restoring lost strength. Restoratives, like all other cooked foods offered and purchased outside the home, were made by authorized guild members. The process of extracting sugar from a large tropical grass, as known as sugarcane began in India around 500 BC. Arabs perfected the cultivation and refining of the sugar around 600 BC. Arab conquest of the Mediterranean region, international trade, and the travels of the Crusaders spread the use of refined sugar throughout Europe during the 13th century through the 15th century. The island of Crete takes its name from the Arabic quandi, meaning crystallized sugar. It was the site of possibly the world's first sugar refinery, built by the Arabs around 1000 BC. Now, sugar remained an expensive luxury until the ability to extract and refine sugarcane became more common. Vence was the first European city to set up its own sugar refineries in the 15th century, making refined cane sugar available throughout the whole region. Many confectioners from that time, such as sugar-fried fruits, sugared almonds, and marzipan, are still prepared in the same manner today. Now, during his travels to the New World, Columbus carried sugarcane from the Canary Islands to Santo Domingo, where it flourished in the tropical climates of the island that is now compromised as the Dominican Republic and Haiti. As sugarcane became more dispersed geographically, the cost of production dropped, causing sugar to lose its status as a luxury item, while increasing its importance as a basic nutrient. During the 16th and the 19th centuries, sugar confectionery began to take a hold in Europe. Now, another source of refined sugar is the sugar beet, the second most important source of sugar in the world. In the 18th century, German chemists discovered how to extract sugar from the root of beets and built a refinery to do this commercially in 1800. When sugarcane supplies were cut off during the Napoleonic Wars, Napoleon ordered the cultivation of sugar beets on a large scale, creating a viable sugar beet industry. Today, much of the sugar consumed in the northern countries comes from sugar beets, and about half of the sugar produced in the United States comes from sugar beets. The culinary crafts evolved during the Middle Ages under the European guild system. The guild system was a method of organizing the production and the sale of goods produced outside the home. Now, see, guilds ensured quality manufacturing methods and consistent pricing. Each guild had a monopoly on preparing certain items. For example, during the reign of King Henry of France, during the years 1553 and 1610, there were separate culinary guilds for rôtisseurs, who cooked la grosse viande, the main cuts of meat, pâtissiers, who cooked poultry, pies, and tarts, tamseurs, who baked breads, and traiteurs, who made ragouts. By the end of the 17th century, according to the culinary historian Barbara Wheaton, Paris bake shops sold only a remarkable variety: rye bread and milk rolls, fine bread and coarse bread, soup breads, and a variety of different little rolls, leavened with brewer's yeast, which is called pain de levure, or other sourdough starters called pain de levain. Now, Escoffier's brilliant culinary career began at the age of 13 in his uncle's restaurant and continued until the death at 89. Called the Emperor of the World's Kitchens, he is perhaps best known for defining French cuisine and dining during La Belle Époque. Unlike Carême, Escoffier never worked as an aristocrat household. Rather, he exhibited his culinary skills in the dining rooms of the finest hotels in Europe, including the Place Vendôme in Paris, and the Savoy and the Carlton hotels in London. Escoffier did much to enhance the grand cuisine that arguably reached its perfections under Carême. Crediting Carême with providing the foundation for great, that is, French cooking, Escoffier simplified the profusion of flavors, dishes, and garnishes, typifying Carême's work. He also streamlined some of Carême's overly elaborate and fussy procedures and classifications. For example, he reduced Carême's elaborate systems for classifying sauces into 5 families of sauces that are still recognized in today's kitchens. Some consider his refinement of grand cuisine to have been so radical as to credit with him with the development of a new cuisine referred to as cuisine classique. His many writings include La Levée des Menus in 1912, in which, discussing the principles of a well-planned meal, he analogues a great dinner to a symphony with contrasting movements so that it should be appropriate to the occasion, the guests, and the season. But most important contribution in the culinary treatise intended for the professional chef, entitled La Guide Culinaire in 1903, still is in use today. It is an outstanding collection of more than 5,000 classic cuisine recipes and garnishes. In it, Escoffier emphasizes the mastery of techniques, the thorough understanding of cooking principles, and the appreciation of your ingredients. Attributes he considered the building blocks of professional chefs should use to create great dishes. Escoffier's most famous recipe was perch melba, created for an Australian opera star, Nellie Melba, when she was staying at the Savoy in 1893. Dame Nellie also liked her toast made in the way that today bears her name, Melba toast. The French claim that the first modern restaurant opened one day in 1765, when a Parisian tavern keeper, a Monsieur Bourgeonnaire, hung a sign advertising the sale of his special restorative. It was a dish of sheep feet in a white sauce. Now, Boulanger's establishment differed from the inns and taverns that existed throughout Europe for centuries. These inns and taverns served food prepared usually off premises by the appropriate guild. The food, of which there was little choice, was offered by the innkeeper, was an incidental to the establishment's primarily function, providing sleep accommodations or a drink. Customers were served family style and ate at communal tables. Boulanger's contribution to the food service industry was to serve a variety of foods prepared on premises to customers whose primary interest was dining. The French Revolution had a significant effect on the building restaurant industry. Along with the aristocracy, guilds, and their monopolies were generally abolished. The revolution also allowed public access to the skills and creativity of the well-trained, sophisticated chefs and pâtissiers who had worked in the aristocracy's private kitchens. Although many of the aristocrats' chefs either left the country or lost their jobs, and even some of them lost their heads during the war, a few opened restaurants catering to growing urbanized middle class. Gaston Lenotre started in the baking trade in the heart of Normandy in the late 1930s. By the age of 15, he had passed his professional exam and set off to work in his hometown. In 1947, he bought the Boulanger Pâtissier of his boss in Pointe-à-Mer. His bakery became a destination for sophisticated Parisians and their way to their country estates. In 1957, he was enticed to open up a shop in Paris at 44 Rue d'Étoile in the 16th arrondissement, one of the city's most stylish sections. It was the first of more than a baker's dozen of locations, plus a vast catering business which literally catered to la Haute Paris. Lenotre's choice of village of Plaisière outside Paris for his third location, a vast production kitchen that became the heart of his expanding empire. He saw that to realize his expansion plans, he needed to train workers in his methods, and he began an in-house school, La École L'Entraîneur. But here is where Gaston Lenotre demonstrated his talent as both a baker and a businessman. There was a crisis in the trade at the time due to the lack of qualified bakers. So Lenotre opened the school a few years later to the entire professional community. For a fee, even his competitors could come and learn from his Meilleurs hors d'oeuvres de France, chefs recognized by the French government as the best artisans in the trade. As befitting a native of Normandy, the hearts of France's dairy industry. Lentre's innovations came in the area of Bavarians, charlottes, and fruit mousses. Now, many of his cakes and torts became modern classics, copied by pastry chefs worldwide. Lentre mastered the techniques of freezing, using it with respect to protect the quality of his products without adulterating them. He used the latest technology to maintain the integrity of his products. Proper freezing preserves the product, extends its shelf life without having to use chemicals or preservatives common in industrial food production. Now, many professionals believe that Lentre single-handedly saved the pastry profession when it was threatened by mass production. Lentre is considered by many as a father of modern French pastry, and his impact is seen and known worldwide. By the early 1980s, he had 18 stores in Japan, as well as outposts in Germany, Switzerland, and England. Today, whether you go to Rio de Janeiro, Disney World in Florida, Lebanon, or Las Vegas, you will find Lentre's name on marquees. Now, following the lead set by French in both culinary style and restaurant businesses, restaurants opened in the United States and throughout Europe during the 19th century. Charles Ranhofer was the first internationally renowned chef of an American restaurant called Delmonico's, located in New York City. In 1893, Ranhofer published his Franco-American Encyclopedia of Cooking, the Epicurean, containing more than 3,500 recipes, including recipes for flannel cakes and brandy snaps. One of the finest restaurants outside of France was the dining room located at London's Savoy Hotel, which opened in 1898 under the direction of César Ritz and Auguste Escoffier. Remember, Escoffier is generally credited with refining the grand cuisine of Carême to create cuisine classique, or classic cuisine. By doing so, he brought French cuisine into the 20th century. In the mid-20th century, we witnessed a trend towards lighter and more naturally flavored and more simply prepared foods. Ferdinand Point was a master practitioner of this movement, but this master's goal of simplicity and refinement was carried to even greater heights by a generation of chefs that Point had trained. Principally, Paul Bocuse, Jean and Pierre Trousgros, Alain Chapelle, and Francois Bis and Louis Othier. They, along with Michael Griard and Roger Vergé, were the pioneers of Nouvelle Cuisine in the early 1970s. In the world of a pâtissier, Gaston Lentronnet made inroads by taking the classic pastries of the Grande Cuisine and adapting them to a brighter, fresher style of pastry making. Their culinary philosophy was principled on the rejection of overly rich, needlessly complicated dishes. These chefs emphasized healthful eatings using high-quality fresh ingredients and more simple cooking methods. The accompaniments and the garnishes must be alight and contribute to the overall harmony, that the completed plates must be elegantly designed and decorated as well. Following the guidelines, pastry chefs began to plate desserts in the kitchen that mimicked the creative and fanciful style of the chef's savory food presentations. These early plated desserts are often paired fresh with fruit sorbets and sauces with artfully presented cakes, mousses, or tarts. Lionel Poulain lived from 1945 to just 2002. He stated that many bakers don't realize is that good wheat can make bad bread. Now, the magic of bread making is in the manipulation of the fermentation, which has been lost using this method. Called a true visionary and an ambassador of bread, Poulain is created with elevating the craft of bread baking and the appreciation of traditional artisan ways of making bread in our time. At the age of 14, he began working in his father's small bakery on a project that would become his life's passion. His father started making a large, dark, rustic loaf, like that of which was common in Paris before the light baguette-style bread captivated the city in the early 1920s. Enchanted by this old-style bread, Poulain dedicated himself to reviving traditional regional breads. Renowned for his attention to detail and appreciation of the craft of the baker, in the early 1980s, he set out to document regional bread recipes, captured in his book, Guide de l'Amateur de Pain. These breads were fading memories before he rediscovered them. His book is used as a reference text in many schools throughout France still to this day. Thousands of loaves of Pain Poulain, the name for his singular crusty round loaf, are made each day in a production bakery outside of Paris. This bread is sold in restaurants and shops throughout Paris and is flown to the United States and more than a dozen other countries on a daily basis. Though the production is large, it is not industrialized. He believed in what they called retro-innovation, combining the best of the old techniques with modern advances. The bakers work at each of the 24 woodstone ovens, forming the loaves by hand. The original shop at 8 Rue de la Chèvre Marie is situated on the site of an old 18th century monastery and house. These ovens are dating back from that time. The shop, which still sells fresh Pain Poulain and limited section of other baked goods, is a mecca for serious bread lovers from around the world. In the 1960s, Poulain began working at his father's bakery, where he learned to make an old-style loaf of bread like that sold in bakers in the 18th century Paris. Using a blend of wholemeal flours and long fermentation times, he learned to bake bread on the stone floors of the wood-fire ovens. Allowing his lead and other bakers in Paris were similarly inspired and rediscovered the traditional ways of making flavorful bread. Now, these bakers were inspired an international interest in producing what is called artisan bread, and that is bread that is made in traditional ways with the purest of ingredients. Pierre Hermé, known as the Picasso of pastry, has acquired a reputation as an innovator, a revolutionary, and a provocateur, and the magician for his success in transforming traditional French desserts, making it into a fine art of dazzling excitement. His Saint-Germain des Prés boutique has become an indispensable stop on the Paris gastronomic circuit, and his elegant creations are displayed like fine jewelry. The novelty and fancy in his creations are always matched by consummate professionalism and perfect technique. Now, coming from a family of pastry makers, Hermé was apprenticed by Gaston Lenotre and headed Vachon's pastry department before setting out on his own, establishing his first outlets in Tokyo. Returning to Paris in 2001, he opened a boutique at 72 Rue Bonaparte, just off Place Saint-Sulpice, which became an overnight sensation, with long lines of international admirers wanting to buy his creations. A second boutique in the 15th arrondissement soon followed. If any delicacy typifies the Hermé phenomenon, it would be the almond macaroon. From the standard flavors of coffee and raspberry, he has extended the repertoire to chestnut and green tea. Like the major fashion house, he has rolled out with new spring, summer, and fall-winter lines. His hottest selling creation is the Isfan, consisting of rose petal cream, fresh raspberries, and lychee nuts, sandwiched between two rose-flavored petaled macaroons and topped with rose petals. Chocolate also deserves special mention. Hermé opened a chocolate bar in Tokyo in 2005 and treats the medium like a magic potion to stretch the limits of his creativity and sensory pleasures for his customers. For those who can't get to Paris or Tokyo, Hermé's prolific contributions to the dessert literature, along with a line of e-gourmandise from fruitcakes to chocolates, are available from the Hermé website. During the last 40 years, broad changes have affected the culinary landscape in the United States. Now, during this period, restaurateurs and chefs began Americanizing the principles of French Nouvelle Cuisine. When Alice Waters opened Chez Panisse in Berkeley, California in 1971. Her goal was to serve fresh food, simply prepared. Rejecting the growing popularity of processed and packaged foods, Waters wanted to use fresh, seasonal, and locally grown produce in simple preparations that preserves and emphasized the food's natural flavors. Chez Panisse and the many chefs who passed through its kitchen launched a new style of cuisine that has become well known as the New American Cuisine. As Waters' culinary philosophy spread across the United States, farmers and chefs began working together to make fresh, locally grown foods available. And producers and suppliers began developing domestic sources for some of the high-quality ingredients that were once available only from overseas. European styles cultured butter from Vermont and goat cheese from Sonoma, California are just two, for example. Pastry chefs and bakers followed Waters' lead. Those who fell under her direct influence, including Lindsay Shear, Steve Sullivan, and others such as Nancy Silverton, traveled to France to study as Waters had done. They returned with European skills and a desire to serve desserts with freshness and simplicity. Pastry chefs and bakers exposed on their travels to the work of Lintré and Pauline brought these influences into kitchens throughout this country. Combining ingredients and or preparation, others worked to rediscover American cooking and baking traditions. Now, lacking professional reference texts on the subject, professionals turned to cookbooks written for home consumers for inspiration. Talented pastry chefs, such as Medea Hinter, whose 1974 book, Medea Hinter's Book of the Great Desserts, becoming a well-thumbed reference in professional kitchen in the 1970s and in the 1980s. It introduced restaurants public to homey desserts including Palm Beach brownies and sweet potato pecan pie. By the mid-1980s, American chefs began a period of bold experimentation. They began to combine ingredients and preparation methods of a variety of cuisines. Their work resulted in fusion cuisine. Now, with fusion cuisine, ingredients or preparation methods associated with one ethnic or regional cuisine are combined with those of another. French pastry cream flavored with star anise served with a banana spring roll or a kiwi Napoleon are examples of fusion preparations. Now, the Retail Bakers of America, which represent in the interest of independent bakeries, estimate more than 30,000 retail bakeries operate here in the United States. Professional trade publications such as the Modern Baking and Milling and Baking News peg the baking industry as a $100 billion business. According to the American Bakers Association, which represents more than 700 baking facilities and baking company suppliers, that the commercial baking industry employs over 700,000 skilled workers. Now, training in the baking and pastry arts can lead to work in the myriad establishments such as in-store bakeries and supermarkets, food service bakeries, cafes, and commercial specialty cake manufacturing, as well as the finest pastry kitchens or independent artisan bakeries. The culinary influences felt across the American food revolution began in the 1970s and is now firmly rooted and has intensified. The early decades of the 21st century, there is a farm-to-table movement as chefs work in tandem with farmers to bring fresh flavors while preserving local agricultural and heirloom varieties. The interest in locally raised ingredients have materialized into restaurants where chefs serve seasonal foods such as spring berries or autumn apples found within a few miles of their establishment. Since 1980, the culinary influence of immigrants from Southeast Asia, India, China, Latin America, and other regions are being felt around the country. Restaurants and shops catered to their cuisine have opened in neighborhoods where they have settled. Across the country, chefs are absorbing these influences and incorporating these flavors and techniques as never before. The fluidity of international borders and the accessibility of global travel and the popularity of the internet have made the liards of the world available to many different chefs. Every pastry chef is also experimenting in novel ways, defying conventional kitchens, wisdom, and employing techniques more than common in industrial manufacturing than in the classical kitchens. Inspired and influenced by modernists, experimental cuisine or molecular gastronomy is a movement which roots in Spain and France. Pastry chefs such as Elizabeth Faulkner, Will Goldfarb, Pierre Hermé, and Gianni Iuzzini are reinventing the notion of pastry and desserts, often with the use of dry ice and vacuum machines as well as fresh. Today, many Europeans and American food writers and pundits now consider American chefs among some of the best in the world. The baking industry in the United States can be divided into 4 segments: retail, in-store, restaurant and food service, or wholesale. The largest volume of business is conducted by wholesale bakeries, but there are career opportunities in a wide variety of settings utilizing a range of skills and accommodating various worker preferences. Entrepreneurs may choose to open their own bake shop, whereas bakers are more comfortable in a corporate setting more than may opt out of a career in a wholesale or an in-store facility. Retail bakers are relatively low-volume businesses that produce and sell items directly to the consumer. A retail bakery may make a wide variety of breads, cakes, cookies, pastries, and desserts, or it may specialize in 1 or 2 items, such as cupcakes, bagels, wedding cakes, or maybe even donuts. In-store bakeries found in groceries and club stores offer a range of locally popular breads, cakes, cookies, and pies. Some may be made entirely from scratch. Others may be assembled from pre-made icings, frozen cakes, or simple mixes. Restaurants, bake shops produce items for the restaurant's desserts menu and for other uses in the area. For example, a hotel bake shop will produce individual plated desserts for each restaurant located at the property. But they may also make puff pastry and pâté dough for use in garmage, chocolates for room service, or grand display pieces for elegant buffets. Upscale restaurants may prepare all desserts and bread items in-house, whereas a less ambitious restaurant with a small staff may purchase its items directly from a wholesale bakery. Wholesale bakeries produce foods that reach in the final consumer through the grocery store, restaurants, and hotels, or the wholesaler's own retail outlets. A large wholesale bakery may have sophisticated production equipment capable of producing hundreds, even thousands of items per hour. It may produce a range of breads, desserts, cookies, crackers, or it may specialize in one type of product, such as pretzels. Bakers and chefs still play an integral part in the research and development of wholesale products and flavor profiles. No matter the size of the organizational concepts, they're the same. To function efficiently, a bake shop and a pastry operation must be well organized and staffed with appropriate personnel. Today, most food service operations use a simplified version of a kitchen brigade, a system created by the great Augustus Vescavier in the early 20th century. The executive chef coordinates kitchen activities and directs the kitchen staff's training and work efforts. The executive chef plans menus and creates recipes. Now, he or she sets the quality standards and participates in, or at least observes, the preparation and presentation of menu items to ensure that those standards are met and maintained. He or she also purchases food items and equipment, and in some food service operations, the executive chef may help design the menu, dining room, and kitchen. He or she trains the dining room staff so that they can correctly answer questions about their menu. He or she may also work with food purveyors to learn about new food items and products, as well as with catering directors, equipment vendors, food stylists, restaurant consultants, public relations specialists, sanitation engineers, and nutritionists and dietitians. The executive chef is assisted by a sous chef or an executive sous, who participates and supervises and coordinates the preparation of the menu items. His or her primary responsibility is to make sure that the food is prepared, portioned, garnished, and presented according to the executive chef's standards. The sous chef may be the cook principally responsible for producing menu items and supervising the kitchen. Large hotels and conference centers with multiple dining facilities may have one or more area or station chefs, each responsible for a specific facility or function. There could be, for instance, a restaurant chef and a banquet chef. Area chefs usually report to the executive chef. Each area chef, in turn, has a brigade working under him or her. Assistants and apprentices are assigned where there's needed to assist and learn in that area. The pastry chef, or the pâtissier in French, develops recipes and prepares the desserts, pastries, frozen desserts, and breads. He or she reports directly to the executive chef and usually purchases the food items used in the bake shop. In a large operation, an executive pastry chef may oversee a staff of pastry specialists. And a classic kitchen brigade includes a pastry chef who supervises the bread baker, the boulanger, or who makes the breads, rolls, and baked doughs container used for other menu items. For example, bouchis and frulettes, the confectioner or the confencier who makes candies and petit fours, the ice cream maker, the glacier, who makes all chilled and frozen desserts, and the decorator, the decorateur, who makes the showpieces and special cakes. An executive pastry chef possesses the same authority and responsibility within his or her area of expertise as an executive chef. The ACF, or the American Culinary Federation, offers 4 levels of certification in pastry, culminating with certified master pastry chef, and currently only 11 chefs hold this level of certification. The independent retail pastry shop, or the bake shop, is organized into departments according to the tasks required. A head baker directs the mixing and baking of all the baked goods. He or she may purchase all the ingredients and train staff on preparation. One group of bakers may bake the bread while another group mixes all the yeast dough and laminated dough to make the breads and pastries. A cake decorator fills and ices cakes according to the style of the operation. A bake shop may employ a master baker. This title recognizes the highest level of achievement. Only highly skilled and experienced bakers who have demonstrated their professional knowledge in written and in practical exams are entitled to use it. This title recalls to the European Guild tradition still alive in many countries today. In France and Germany, for example, a baker must pursue many years of classroom and job training, work as an apprentice, and pass numerous examinations before acquiring the right to call himself or herself a master baker. In the United States, several professional organizations administer programs leading to this certification as a master baker. Today, the job prospects for a skilled baker or pastry chef are wide and varied. The corner bakery, with the baker in the back producing daily batches of bread and sweets while his wife serves the customers, has been renovated. In most cities, artisan-style bake shops inspired by those found in France, Italy, and Germany are appearing. Products offered may include luscious pastries and rustic breads, as well as coffee and light meals. Chains of bakery cafes now dot the national landscape and serve increasingly better quality products. Skilled personnel are needed to staff hundreds of retail locations as well as off-site commissary bakeries and kitchens. In restaurants of every different kind, from fast casual to luxury establishments, dessert service has been elevated to the level of fine cuisine. So you may want to ask yourself, how do I survive and spend my life trying to satisfy the nation's unsustainable sweet tooth in the industry? No one has more friends than a pastry chef, but getting there is hard work and only for a very dedicated person. However, if you are that kind of person who can't fall asleep at night because you're distracted by a new dessert you thought up by using figs, creme brulee base, cheddar cheese ice cream, and port reduction, then this may be the art form for you. You may have discovered your love for baking at your mom's knee, but she's not coming into the pro kitchen with you. So make sure you choose it for the right reasons, because you can't imagine doing anything else. Keep in mind that everyone has something to teach you, even your chef. As you trust yourself, putting on your apron, feel confident, feel strong. Play well with others in the sandbox, and teach your hands to work like a surgeon's. And consort with your mind. Constantly try new recipes and solve problems. Do not make them. Scrape your mixing bowl often, more often than you really want to, and check your math twice when scaling up a recipe. The main thing is to always, always, always wear comfortable shoes, because your feet are happy, you'll be happy, and you'll be more successful at this glorious form of expression called pastry. Now, pastry chefs and bakers must be able to identify, purchase, use, and prepare a wide variety of foods. That's why knowledge is very important and a key word. They should be able to train and supervise a safe, skilled, and efficient staff. To do all that successfully professional pastry chefs and bakers must possess a body of knowledge and understand and apply certain scientific and business principles. Schooling helps. A professional baking program should be at minimum, provided the student with the basic knowledge of foods and baking ingredients, food styles, and the methods used to prepare foods. As students should also understand sanitation, nutrition, and the business procedures such as food costing. In your book, it attempts to address the core competencies needed for success in the field. The study begins with extensive sections identifying equipment, tools, and ingredients throughout the book. Basic baking principles are discussed while formulas illustrate the principles in action. Whenever possible, whether it be preparing puff pastry or ice cream, the focus on the material is often a general procedure, highlighting your fundamentals and principles and skills, both the hows and whys of baking. Only then are specific applications and sample formulas given. In order for the student to gain a sense of the rich tradition in food in the baking and pastry arts, informative sidebars on culinary history, chef biographies, and other topics are scattered throughout your book. In this way, the materials in this book follow the trail blazed by Escoffier, who wrote the introduction to La Guide Culinaire, that his book is not intended to be a commendum of recipes slavishly followed, but rather as a tool that leaves his colleagues free to develop their own methods and follow their own inspiration in the art of cooking. This will evolve as society evolves. Only the basic rules remain unaltered. As for any professional, an education does not stop at graduating. The acquisition of knowledge continues throughout one's professional career. Look for opportunities to learn advanced skills through additional classes on pastry traditions or techniques, nutrition, or even business management classes. Stay abreast of trends by rendering some of the many periodicals and books devoted to baking and pastry arts. Well-rounded food professionals should travel and should try new products to broaden their culinary horizons. Professional organizations offer career support, opportunities to exchange ideas with one's peers, and a chance to build a network of relationships that will last a lifetime. Professional training alone does not make a student a pastry chef or baker. Nothing but practical, hands-on experience will provide even the most academically gifted student with the skills needed to produce consistently and efficiently quality foods, or to organize, train, motivate, or supervise a staff. Many baking and food service operations recognize that new workers, even those who have graduated from culinary programs, need time and experience to develop and hone their skills. Therefore, many graduates start in entry-level positions. Do not be discouraged. Advancement will come, and the training pays off in the long run. Learn from those with experience and accept criticism as part of the learning process. Seeking out and working with seasoned professionals will contribute to the student's learning experience. Today, culinary styles and fashions change frequently. What does not go out of fashion is well-trained, skilled, and knowledgeable professionals. They can adapt. Now let's talk about taste. No matter how knowledgeable or skilled the baker or the pastry chef is, he or she must be able to produce foods that taste great, or the consumer will not return. A professional baker or a pastry chef can do so only with confidence about his or her own sense of taste. Our total perception of taste is a complex combination of smell, taste, sight, sound, and texture. All senses are involved in enjoyment of eating. All must be considered in creating or preparing a dish. The baking professional should develop a taste memory by sampling food, both familiar and unfamiliar. Baking professionals should also think about what they taste, making notes, and experimenting with flavor combinations and cooking methods. But one should not be intentive simply for the sake of invention. Rather, a pastry chef must consider how the flavors appear, their appearance, their textures, and their aroma of various foods, how they interact to create a total taste experience. Next, we go on to judgment. Now, creating a pastry menu and determining how much of what item to order, deciding whether or how to combine ingredients, and approving finished products for service are all matters of judgment. Although knowledgeable and skill play a role in developing judgment, sound judgment comes only with experience. And a real experience is often accompanied by failure. Do not be upset or surprised when a dish does not turn out as expected. One can learn from these mistakes as well as from success. These experiences will help you develop sound judgment. Another very important word we're going to talk about is dedication. Becoming a pastry chef and a baker is hard work. So is being one. The work is often physically taxing, the hours often in early mornings and usually long, and the pace is frequently hectic. Despite these pressures, the professional is expected to efficiently produce constantly fine and consistently fine products that are properly prepared and presented. To do so requires enthusiastic pastry chefs and bakers who are dedicated to the job. Dedication means never faltering. The baker and food service industry is competitive and depends on the continuing goodwill of an often fickle public. One bad dish, one pale loaf, one night off can result in a disgruntled employee or a customer and a loss of business. The pastry chef and baker should always be mindful of the food prepared and the customer served. The true professional is dedicated to his or her staff. Virtually all bakers and food service operations rely on teamwork to get the job done well. Good teamwork requires a positive attitude and a dedication to a shared goal. Now, one of the last words I want to talk about today in this lecture is pride. It's one of the most important words because pride wraps up a little bit of all the other words that we talked about. Without pride, you can't have good judgment. You can't have good dedication. You can't have good taste, and so forth. So professional bakers and pastry chefs share a sense of pride in doing their jobs well. Not only does this go for professional bakers and pastry chefs, but it goes for your executive chefs on the savory side as well, and the line cooks and so forth. Pride should also extend to your personal appearance and behavior in and around the kitchen. The professional should be well groomed and in uniform while working. A pastry chef wears the same uniform that is worn by any professional chef. Comfortable shoes, trousers, either solid white, solid black, or black and white houndstooth checkered, or even sometimes black and white striped. A white double-breasted jacket, an apron, maybe a neckerchief, usually knotted or tied cravat style. The uniform has certainly utilitarian aspects. Checked trousers disguise stains. The double-breasted white jacket can be rebuttoned to hide dirt, and the double layer of fabric protects from scalds and burns. The neckerchief absorbs facial sweat, and the apron protects the uniform and insulates the body. The professional baker's uniform varies from that of other chefs. Though comfortable shoes are the foundation of any professional's uniform, the baker may wear white trousers and a short-sleeved white shirt. The choice of white is utilitarian, and it does not show the presence of flour, as would a dark-colored uniform. The uniform should also be worn with pride. Shoes should be polished. Your trousers and jacket should be pressed. The crowning element of the uniform is the toque. A toque is a tall white hat worn by chefs almost everywhere. Now, most chefs now wear a standard 6-inch or a 9-inch high toque, but historically, the cooks rank in the kitchen dedicated by that type of hat worn. Beginners wore a flat-topped calotte, or cooks with more advanced skills wore low toques, and the master chefs wore the high toques, called dodin bouffants. Now, traditionally, the baker wears a flat-top baker's cap. Its derivative is quite simple, bending and working close to bread ovens and would prevent a tall cap from staying in place. But let's move on to one of the most important things that you might need to know when it comes to being in the industry. Safe handling food practices. Now, learning about food contaminants and how they are spread and how they can be prevented or controlled can help ensure customer safety. Temperature is the most important factor in the environment of pathological bacteria because it's the factor that's most easily controlled by food service workers. Most microorganisms are destroyed at very high temperatures. Freezing slows them down but does not stop the growth, nor does it destroy the bacteria. Most bacteria that causes foodborne illness multiply rapidly at the temperatures between 70 and 125. Therefore, the broad range of temperatures between 41 and 135 is referred to as the temperature danger zone. Keeping foods out of this danger zone decreases the bacteria's ability to thrive and reproduce. To control the growth of any bacteria that may be present, it is important to maintain the internal temperature of food at least 135 or above and 41 degrees or below. Simply stated, keep hot foods hot and cold foods cold. TCS, or time control sensitive foods, should be heated or cooled quickly so that they are within the temperature danger zone as briefly as possible. This is known as the time and temperature principle. Keep your foods hot. If they're hot, hot foods are hot. The high internal temperatures reached during proper cooking kills most of the bacteria that can cause foodborne illnesses. Once properly heated, hot foods must be held at a temperature of 135 degrees or above. Now, foods that are displayed or served hot must be heated rapidly to reduce the time within the temperature danger zone. And there are some steps when heating or reheating foods. First step is you want to heat small quantities at a time. Stir frequently. Heat foods as close to service time as possible. Use preheated ingredients whenever possible to prepare hot foods. Never, ever use a steam table for heating or reheating foods. Bringing reheated foods to an appropriate internal temperature, at least to 165 degrees before placing it in a steam table before holding. One thing is, keep cold foods cold. Now, foods that are displayed, stored, or served cold must be cooled rapidly. So here are the steps. When cooling foods, refrigerate semi-solid foods at 41 degrees or below in containers that are less than 2 inches deep. Avoid crowding the refrigerator. You want to allow the air to circulate around the foods. Vent and cool hot foods in an ice water bath. Maybe pre-chill some ingredients such as a pastry cream before preparing cold foods. Store cooked foods above raw foods to prevent cross-contamination. Now, when it comes to keeping frozen foods frozen, remember, you want to freeze at 0 degrees or below, essentially stops the bacterial growth, but does not kill the bacteria. Do not place hot foods in a standard freezer. This does not cool the food any faster, and the release of heat can raise the actual temperature of other foods in the freezer. Only a special blast freezer can be used for chilling hot food items. If one is not available, cool hot foods as mentioned earlier before freezing them. When frozen foods are thawed, bacteria that present begin to grow. Therefore, follow these steps. Never thaw food at room temperature. Thaw foods gradually under refrigeration to maintain the food's temperature at 41 degrees or less. Place thawing foods in a container to prevent cross-contamination from dripping or leaking liquids. Thaw foods under running cold water at room temperature or cold at 70 degrees. Thaw foods in a microwave only if the food will be prepared and served immediately. Now, you've heard this word before and you're going to hear it many different times throughout your class, and it's called the temperature danger zone. The temperature danger zone is a broad range of temperatures in which most of the bacteria that causes foodborne illnesses multiply rapidly. The 2013 Model Food Code of the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, indicates that the temperature danger zone begins at 41 degrees and ends at 135. Now, regulations in some localities and with some other organizations may vary, however. Here, we use the range recommended by the FDA. Now, bacteria needs moisture to thrive. Dry foods such as flour, sugar, and crackers are rarely subjected to bacterial infestations. However, when a dry food such as beans is cooked and moistened, it becomes a breeding ground for the growth of any bacteria that might be present. Bacteria does not thrive in foods that are high in acid, such as lemon juice or vinegar. Simply adding acid, however, should not be relied on to destroy bacteria or to preserve foods. Now, when we talk about cross-contamination, generally, microorganisms and other contaminants cannot move by themselves. Rather, they are carried to foods and food contact surfaces by none other than humans, rodents, or insects. Now, this transfer is referred to as cross-contamination. Humans provide the ideal environment for growth of microorganisms. Everyone harbors bacteria in their nose and mouth. Now, these bacteria spread easily through sneezing or coughing or not washing your hands, frequently and properly. Workers who are ill should report the illness promptly to their supervisor, who has the right to ask them to leave work if their illness threatens contamination in the kitchen. The best prevention is not to report to the work when sick. Wearing clean, single-use disposable gloves is the best way to avoid bare hand contact with ready-to-eat foods, such as sandwiches or when garnishing or portioning baked goods, such as cookies, cakes, and brownies. Now, there is a procedure when it comes to properly washing your hands. Observing proper cleaning procedures prevents cross-contamination. Kitchen staff can do several things to decrease the risk of illnesses being spread by poor personal hygiene. These steps are as follows. Wash your hands frequently and thoroughly. Gloves are not a substitute for proper hand washing. Keep your fingernails short, clean, and neat, and do not bite nails or wear nail polish. Keep any cut or wound antiseptically bandaged. An injured hand should also be covered with a disposable glove. You make sure you want to bathe daily, or more often if required. Keep your hair clean and restrained. Wear work clothes that are clean and neat. Avoid wearing jewelry or watches. Never eat, drink, smoke, or chew gum in a food preparation area. Even with proper hand washing, bakery and food service workers should strive to minimize direct contact with prepared foods by using single-use gloves, clean tongs, tasting spoons, baking tissues, and other appropriate tools. Be aware that disposable gloves can prevent cross-contamination only when used properly. Now, you want to wash your hands before putting on disposable gloves because microorganisms on the hands can contaminate the gloves. Gloves, along with proper bandaging, must always be worn if there's a cut or an infection on the hand. Wear single-use gloves for only one task. For example, change gloves immediately after handling raw meats and when switching from making sandwiches to making salads. Change gloves as often as necessary, when they are torn or after 4 hours of continual use. Do not wash and try to reuse disposable gloves. Now, to remove a glove, grab the cuff, peel the glove off, out over your fingertips, and throw it away. Check your local regulations because most health departments require the use of disposable gloves when handling any ready-to-eat foods. Bakery and food service workers can prevent cross-contamination by observing proper cleaning and sanitizing procedures. Soiled cutting boards, knives, and side towels are a major source of cross-contamination. For example, when a cutting board that has been used to cut raw poultry is used to slice fruit for a salad, the fruit can become exposed to microorganisms present in the poultry. Probe thermometers should be washed before and after each use. Use a clean cloth dipped in a sanitizing solution when wiping off knives, utensils, or cutting boards during work. An acceptable solution can be made by combining 1 gallon of lukewarm water with 1 tablespoon of chlorine bleach. Replace the solution every 2 hours and store below work areas to avoid accidental spills. Cleaning refers to removing visible soils and food residue. Sanitizing only refers to removing harmful substance to safe levels. Something that is clean may not always be sanitary. The visible dirt can be removed, but the disease-causing microorganisms may remain. Now, the cleaning of dishes, pots, and pans and utensils in a bakery and food service operation involves both removing the soil and sanitizing. Soil can be removed manually or by machine. The sanitizing can be accompanied with heat or a chemical disinfectant. The procedures are as follows. Procedures for manual washing is rinse and sanitizing dishes, and equipment generally follow the 3-compartment sink setup. The dishwasher must do the following. Scrape and spray the item to remove the soil. Wash the item in the first sink compartment using an approved detergent. A brush or a cloth may be used to remove any remaining soil. Rinse and spray the item in the second sink compartment using clear hot water, and sanitize the item in the third compartment by either immersing it in 171-degree water for at least 30 seconds or immersing it in an approved chemical sanitizing solution used according to the manufacturer's directions. Empty, clean, and refill each sink compartment as necessary and check the water temperature regularly. Bakeware, cookware, dishes, silverware, and utensils should always be allowed to air dry, as towel drying actually recontaminates them. Chemical products used to clean and sanitize equipment should be stored well away from clean equipment and foodstuffs to avoid contaminating foodstuffs with these chemicals. Now, another big thing we worry about is pest control. And pest control is a very special concern in the bake shop, as insects and rodents infestation of bulk ingredients such as flour and grain can introduce harmful contaminants to otherwise safe ingredients. An insect or a rodent infestation is usually considered a serious health risk and should be dealt with immediately and thoroughly. Pests must be controlled by, number 1, building them out of the facility. Number 2, creating an environment in which they cannot find food, water, or shelter. And last but not least, number 3, relying on a professional extermination. The best defense against pests is to prevent infestation in the first place by building them out. Any crack, no matter how small, in door frames, walls, or windowsills should be repaired immediately, and all drain pipes and vents should be well sealed. Inspect all deliveries thoroughly and reject any packages or containers that contain evidence of pests. Flies are a perfect method of transportation for bacteria because they feed and breed on human waste and garbage. Use screens or fly fans, also known as air curtains, to keep them out in the first place. Controlling garbage is also essential because moist, warm, decaying organic material attracts flies and provides favorable conditions for each egg to hatch and larva to grow. Now, pest management also requires creating an inhospitable environment for pests. Store all food and supplies at least 6 inches off the floor and 6 inches from the wall. Rotate your stock often to disrupt nesting places and breeding habits. Provide good ventilation in storerooms to remove humidity, airborne and contaminants, grease, and fumes. Do not allow water to stand in drains, sinks, or buckets, as cockroaches are attracted to moisture. And always clean up your spills and crumbs immediately and completely to reduce their food supply. Despite all best efforts to build pests out and maintain proper housekeeping standards, it is still important to watch for the presence of pests. For example, cockroaches leave a strong, oily odor and feces that looks like large grains of peppers. Now, cockroaches prefer to search for food and water in the dark, so seeing any cockroach on the move in the daylight is an indication of a large infestation. Rodents, considering mice and rats, tend to hide during the day, so an infestation may be rather serious before any creature is actually seen. Rodent droppings, which are shiny black and brownish gray, may be evident, however. Rodents' nests made from scraps of paper, hair, and other soft material may be spotted. Should an infestation occur, consult a licensed pest control operator immediately. With early detection and proper treatment, infestations can be eliminated. Be very careful in attempting to use pesticides or insecticides by yourself. These chemicals are toxic to humans as well as they are to pests. Great care must be used to prevent contaminating food or exposing workers or customers to these chemicals. Bakery and food service professionals are also responsible for their own personal safety as well as that of their customers and fellow workers. Bake shops and kitchens are filled with objects that can cut, burn, break, crush, and even electrocute or sprain the human body. The best way to prevent work-related injuries are proper training, good work habits, and careful supervision. Now back to more food safety for fruits and vegetables that you'll be using a lot in the bakery. More than half of all foodborne illnesses are linked to fresh produce. The Center of Disease Control and Prevention, or as we might know, the CDC, which we've heard a lot about, estimates that leafy greens are responsible for 1 in 5 cases of any foodborne illness. Before they reach the restaurant, fruits and vegetables may be contaminated in the fields from animal waste, harvesters, transportation, processing, and packaging. Many large-scale produce farmers have adopted the Good Agricultural Practices, or GAPS, and good handling practices to ensure food safety. And processors have been developing and evaluating new produce washes to reduce surface contaminations. Yet there is no way to guarantee that produce will be pathogen-free. There are some things you can do to reduce the likelihood of serving contaminated produce. You want to wash all whole produce well before cutting it. Remember to clean and sanitize your equipment frequently, taking care not to contaminate your cutting board with the field soil that may be clinging to the box or the plant. Refrigerate any produce immediately after washing and cutting it. Cut fruits deteriorate much faster than intact produce, so cutting breaks the plant's cell walls, allowing microorganisms to invade the material. This accelerates the spoilage and the growth of pathogenic organisms. Use cut produce as soon as possible. If you purchase pre-washed bagged salad, mixed salad greens, and fresh cut fruit, inspect the packages upon delivery. Reject any that are above 41 degrees or those that show signs of decomposition. Always use bagged salads, mixed salad greens, and fresh cut produce by the use-by date. Discard any decomposed pre-washed greens. Rewashing risks spread of contamination. The federal government enacted legislation designed to reduce hazards in the work area, thereby reducing accidents. The Occupational Safety and Health Act, or OSHA, covers a broad range of safety matters. Employers who fail to follow its rules can be severely fined. Unfortunately, human error is the leading cause of accidents, and no amount of legislation can protect someone who doesn't work in a safe manner. Safe behavior on the job reflects pride, professionalism, and consideration for fellow workers. The following list should alert you to some of the conditions and activities aimed at preventing accidents and injuries. Clean up spills as soon as they occur. Learn to operate equipment properly. Always use the guards and the safety devices. Turn off or unplug electrical equipment before cleaning. Wear clothing that fits properly. Avoid wearing jewelry which might get caught in equipment. Use knives and other equipment for their intended purposes only. Walk, do not run. Keep exits, aisles, and stairs clear and unobstructed. Always assume pots and pans are hot. Handle them always with a dry towel. Position pots and pan handles out of the aisle so that they do not get bumped. Get help or use a cart when lifting or moving heavy objects. Avoid back injury by lifting with your legs. Stoop, don't bend when lifting. Use an appropriately placed ladder or stool for climbing. Do not use a chair, box, drawer, or shelf. Keep breakable items away from food storage and production areas. And warn people when you must walk behind them, especially when carrying a knife or a hot pan. Some accidents will inevitably occur, and it is important to act appropriately in the event of an injury or emergency. This may mean calling for help or providing first aid. Every bake shop and food service operation should be equipped with a complete first aid kit. Municipal regulations may specify the exact contents of the kit. Be sure that the kit is conveniently located and well stocked at all times. The American Red Cross and your local public health departments offer training in first aid, cardiopulmonary, and the Heimlich maneuvers used for choking victims. All employees should be trained in basic emergency procedures, and a list of emergency telephone numbers should always be posted by each telephone. So guys, I hope you found that lecture a little informative. That's going to just mainly get you started and talk a little bit about the bakery and the history of baking and so forth. So I like to leave every class with a little quote from a chef. And today's quote comes from Chef Anna Olson. And she said, "Baking may be regarded as a science, but it's the chemistry between the ingredients and the cook that gives desserts life. Baking is done out of love to share with family and friends and to see them smile." So I hope you found this lecture very informative, and I will see you on the next one. You guys stay safe and be careful out there.